Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone, first and foremost, for making the time to join us today. We really appreciate it. We have a great webinar session today for you today, excuse me, on the topic of modernizing your digital foundation, conquering technical debt and legacy systems. I'm joined by two of our experts within the LifeRay ecosystem today, Erica Ganayak, who's Senior Solution Architect at LifeRay, and Sam Hyland, who's Vice President of Professional Services at Veriday. Now, Erica, Sam, can I ask you to maybe kick things off a little bit by telling us a little bit about yourselves and maybe about LifeRay and Veriday respectively?
Yeah, I can kick things off. As Yotam said, my name is Erica Ganayak, and I'm an enterprise architect on our LifeRate enablement team. And my career journey has actually been kind of rooted in enterprise application integration projects, and this has given me the chance to see firsthand the profound impact of what disconnected systems and data silos can have in a business. And from working with customers at IBM as a software consultant, integrating business processes with advanced analytics, to my current role helping organizations kind of build their own digital solutions, the common thread I've always found has always been the critical need for the seamless information flow. Today, Sam and I will hopefully inspire some approaches that can help you to unify your technology and hopefully trigger some great discussions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Erica. It's wonderful to have you joining us today. Sam, might I turn things over to you next to tell the audience a little bit about your background and the great work that you do at Veriday.
Thanks, Yotam. First, let me introduce Veriday. So Veriday is a company we were founded around the same time as LifeRay, actually, 2003. So just a year before. We've got about 100 employees, headquartered in Toronto, offices in New York, and Cochin in India. And we really do a lot of digital transformation work, a lot of portal work, automation work, data work in a lot of different spaces. And our history with LifeRay actually goes back almost all the way to LifeRay's founding. I think one of our first projects was probably 2005, 2006, around then, working with a hospital who was implementing a major provider portal internally and chose LifeRay back in its early days as a solution. Personally, I've actually been with Veriday since those early days as a developer, coming up as an architect, and now running our services practice. And like Erica, I'm looking to share some of my experiences with you. Hopefully, it'll be insightful and help you with your transformation, modernization initiatives internally as well.
Thank you so much, Sam. Really appreciate that, and we are very grateful here at LifeRay to count Veriday as one of our partners. We count ourselves very fortunate for that. Um, now, folks, for those in the audience, just to set a little bit of expectations, what we're going to do today is rather than kind of go through traditionally a bunch of slideware, we're going to try to really have an interactive conversation here with both Erica and Sam. Apologies, I should have noted that at the top, but that'll be the format for today's session. If you have any questions at any point during today's discussion, please don't hesitate to use the chat functionality with the question icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen to ask questions. We'll absolutely address them at the end of the session or follow up afterwards if we don't have time. The other question we sometimes get is whether their webinar will be recorded. Absolutely, everyone attending will get a copy of the recording as well. So sorry, I should have started with those little housekeeping items, but thanks everyone for your patience. And maybe with that, we can just kind of drive the conversation forward. Sam, I'd love to start with you and just kind of pick your brain a little bit here. So in your role as VP of Professional Services, you obviously lead that group within Veriday. And I was curious to kind of get your personal perspective on what are some of the common challenges that you've observed organizations facing when they embark on this kind of journey of modernizing legacy applications, or they're trying to address significant technical debt. I think that's something that many organizations can kind of align to. Um, and I'd love to hear, maybe if there's an example of a client that you work with at Verde who's successfully navigated those challenges.
Thanks. I'd be happy to share my thoughts there. So first, when I think about some of the most common challenges, I think there's four big ones that really stand out for me. This idea of organizational inertia, risk aversion, any technical challenges or unknown technology areas, and then resourcing and skill challenges is a fourth one. As I go through each of those and break them down, I'm going to frame them in the context of a major insurer that we worked with. Unfortunately, I can't share their name, but they were going through a significant modernization effort. It included building out new portals on top of LifeRay, new digital experiences on top of LifeRay. Included improving the security landscape across the organization. It included modernizing their back-end systems, major upgrades and replacements of some of those back-end systems, moving towards an API first approach, and taking all of this and putting it on the cloud. So it was by no means a small initiative. And they successfully navigated all of these challenges as they worked through. So starting with organizational inertia, this is really this idea within a company that if it isn't broke and it's working fine, we don't need to change anything. Um, there's always competing priorities, whether it's cost, whether it's time, whether it's other areas of the business that just are getting more attention. You know, if something's working, doesn't tend to get a lot of attention. Um, what happens though over time is it puts you at a competitive disadvantage because your agile competitors will start to pull ahead and you'll start to face higher costs when that modernization eventually becomes needed. This can be a tricky one to navigate. Within this particular customer that I'm talking to, this insurance customer, they had the benefit of a strong leadership mandate for that modernization, but it was key at every level of the company when you were working with people in different teams on different platforms, different products, to both stress that organizational mandate but also talk to the benefits of modernization so you could get all the stakeholders on side. The second area, very closely related to the first, is risk aversion. So this is that idea that if we change something, something might break. We want to avoid any outages. We want to avoid any disruptions to our business processes. And it's a hard one to navigate because there is risk associated with modernization, but there's also risk with not modernizing. Eventually, some of your customers might abandon unsupported systems. If your user experience isn't up to par, people might go to your competitors that offer a more pleasant, more pleasing user experience. And what will inevitably happen is at some point you will be forced into that modernization effort. So that risk will materialize at some point because perhaps there'll be a critical security issue that you can't ignore, that your business is at risk if you don't modernize, or some of those competitive pressures will happen. And now what's going to happen is you're going to tackle that modernization under a lot more time pressure. And that's just going to compound all of those risks. So it's important to get ahead of this. And that's part of my conversation when I'm dealing with customers who are facing that risk aversion. And it was particularly key with this insurance customer because insurance is really an industry that's driven by risk, right? They understand risk very well because they're in the business of insuring others' risk. So you really need to build trust over time here, making a lot of smaller changes that are maybe lower impact, lower risk, but you're building that trust. You're taking the time to educate and explain the impact of the changes, of the modernization, of the benefits, and not losing that trust as you proceed forward. The third one is the technology side, and my background, as I've said, is in technology. I could talk technology all day. But we've got a diverse group here listening in, and I don't want to focus just in on that. But what is really key here is understanding the current state technology landscape and how that's going to impact your modernization. Because it's the unknown unknowns that are the real risk. And this insurance customer I'm talking about did face some of those. They faced legacy integrations that had been implemented years ago. And while people knew they existed, they weren't well understood and they weren't well documented. So it required tracing code to dive in and understand all of the details. As they did, they were able to plan around it and move forward with the modernization effort. And this really impacted their cloud transition the most because a lot of those legacy integrations were using patterns that weren't well supported on the cloud. The good thing about these, though, is that once you understand them, it's just a matter of time and effort usually to address them. So it's important to invest upfront on the analysis to dive into these details up front. Once you understand them, you can plan for them. If you encounter them mid-project, it can be a little bit trickier, but you can usually still be managed. And the fourth one is a skills gap. And this one is an interesting one for me because within an organization, I'll see one side of the skills gap. I'll be advocating for modernization. Let's take the LifeRay world. Maybe they've been building applications using portlets and JSPs. Now we're coming in and we're saying, well, there's these new things called client extensions in LifeRay. Not so new anymore. They've been around for a few years, and they're proven out and they're a great way to build out the UI on the front end. And we'd like to use React for them. And inside the company, we might get some pushback from internal stakeholders saying, hey, we haven't done React development. We don't know React. We don't have skills in React. And what usually happens here is we'll have some conversations and we'll find out that their internal people are actually very excited and interested in learning these technologies. And given the opportunity, they want to upskill, they want to learn these new patterns. And I'm using React as an example, but it could be anything, it could be entire platforms. Then we'll put a different lens on it and say, hey, look outside. Look at what the wider world is doing here. React is a commodity skill now. You can go out and you can get a React developer very, very easily. Highly skilled, great people. If you want to get a Portlet and JSP developer, they're out there, but it's a little bit harder. It's a little bit more niche. And as any technology ages, you're going to see the same pattern where the aging technology, the resources become harder to find, they become more expensive. The newer technologies tend to get more people, not as expensive. And so taking that different lens from the outside, the modernization skills gap risk is almost flipped. Not modernizing becomes a risk on the skill side. And I think that applies to almost all of these challenges that we've encountered. Um, you can look at them from both sides. If internally there are reasons to avoid change, but they're actually also all risks of not changing. And it's why it's really important that you address them and you stay modern, and you look to modernize your applications and you don't freeze yourself at a point in time.
Thanks, Sam. That makes a lot of sense, and really appreciate your insight. Eric, I want to turn to you for a moment. We just heard Sam cover a couple points, give a great example of a customer in the insurance industry, talk through the risk of kind of falling behind on modernization, especially from a skills gap perspective. I'm curious, you also have quite an extensive technical background, including at LifeRay and at IBM. And I'm curious, taking it to LifeRay specifically, are there tools or things within the platform that would help organizations overcome some of those challenges around modernization, perhaps involving the skills gap that Sam had mentioned?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And just to build on what Sam has already talked about on some of the great ways that he's helped clients to successfully navigate some of these common challenges, kind of putting on my enterprise architect lens here. I think it's given me a pretty good firsthand sense of the challenges of large scale system integration and data silos and that accumulation of debt over time. So companies would often find themselves with that patchwork of system, and some of them could be decades old that really hindered their agility and their innovation. And I think LifeRay DXP can address these challenges starting with architecture, which is modular and it's extensible by design. So by leveraging features such as LifeRay objects and client extensions, it enables companies to incrementally modernize. So you don't have to rip out and replace everything all at once, which is a huge relief. And then we can strategically decouple functionalities and build these new modern experiences on top of existing data and services, and then gradually retire those legacy components. This is going to minimize risk and disruption, which is crucial for businesses and large enterprises, I think. And also, I would say that LifeRay acts as a unified presentation layer where you can pull data from and services from different backend systems, including those legacy applications. And you can present them within a more cohesive, modern user experience look and feel. So customers frequently tell us that they've got valuable data trapped in older systems. And LifeRay can help unlock that data, enabling companies to kind of leverage that valuable data and business logic still residing in your older system while offering your users, be it customers, partners, or employees, that seamless contemporary interface. So it's about getting the most out of your existing investments while kind of laying a foundation for future growth rather than starting from scratch. And I think this approach significantly helps in chipping away at that technical debt and creating that modern facade without immediately rebuilding that entire back end. And to give a concrete example, we have a customer, Barnardo's Australia, which went from 9 disconnected systems to one central LifeRay self-service portal. And this approach helped them to overcome so many issues, such as difficult to find information, where information was entered in one system, personal information retrieved from another, managing incident reports from a third system even. There was inconsistent data due to duplicate and incorrectly entered data, and inadequate reporting across systems. So all of these things, kind of bringing them into a central LifeRay self-service portal. And now caseworkers can save hours a day when they log in. Real-time data is always accurate and updated automatically, and reports are generated within minutes, which I think is a really great use case.
That's terrific. That's terrific, Erica. Yeah, I love the Bernardos Australia use case. Thanks so much for sharing that. Sam, I'd love to turn back to you for a moment now. And, I've always said one of the things that I love most about having Veride as a customer is, excuse me, as a partner, is some of the great customers that you've worked with, including, A.T. Kearney and Volkswagen and Canadian Tire. And I was curious to kind of build off of maybe a little bit of the example that Erica just gave about Bernardo's. When you go into a client and you begin to do that work in identifying, prioritizing technical debt within that client's application portfolio, are there specific methodologies or tools that you find particularly effective when doing that?
Yeah, so what I find is you always have to show the value of addressing the technical debt. We had one customer we worked with where internally the word refactoring had become this big dirty word because business would come with a story, with a feature request, and the development team would say, great, we can do that, but we've got to spend a couple days doing some refactoring first in order to support the changes we need so that we can start work on your story. And the refactoring just became a cost in business's mind without necessarily contributing to the value of the feature that they were asking for. So it's important that you find, if you're coming into a customer and you're trying to identify and prioritize that technical debt, that you find the areas that are going to be high impact and low effort. And the way we'll do that is coming in first, trying to establish a baseline. And we'll try to use some tools to establish that baseline so we can continuously measure it. We don't want to do something that's big manual effort because it's not repeatable. We want some sort of number or score that we never want to go below again. So we'll look at using a lot of tools for this. We might use some APM tools for runtime interactions, get some metrics out of them quickly. We'll use a lot of static code analysis tools, things like SonarQube that are going to go in there, calculate code scores. I love that cognitive complexity that it can give for some of the code where you've got loops inside loops inside loops, and it says, hey, this is an area that's going to be expensive to touch and change. You might want to simplify it. We'll look at things like API gateway logs, maybe do some database mapping, look at slow query logs, really identifying any hotspots, any areas that could be improved. And like I said, that becomes our quality baseline. We don't want to go below it, but getting more into this question of methodology and where we're going to prioritize the debt. The next step is understanding the business and the technology at a higher level. So doing some business process mapping, understanding the workflows inside the business. Where are they generating revenue? What's critical to their customers? What areas where if there's an outage or something doesn't work, is that going to have immediate costs for the business? Then looking at the technical architecture side, and that baseline becomes part of that. But we're looking for things like, single points of failure, unsupported or outdated technology, areas that need to be addressed. And we're going to overlay these two pieces and build out a bit of a heat map that shows the hotspots where there's some overlap. And that's where we get into some prioritization efforts here now, where we say, okay, look at this. We've got a single point of failure over here. And at the same place we've got this single point of failure, we've got a revenue generating area for the company. Maybe we want to address this first. So we're looking for those areas where the business value, the technical risk overlap, and we're then, kind of scoring them by technical complexity. So we're attacking some of those lower technical complexity areas first. And all of this together, lets us put together a bit of a report, some analysis that we can share with senior stakeholders and get buy-in for addressing that technical risk. I'm going to add one other piece too that I think is really interesting we're exploring is a lot of the AI tools that are out there. So a lot of those static code analysis tools are starting to incorporate AI. There's other AI tools that are looking at analyzing your code base or looking at how the application is performing. And we're really monitoring that space because we think that could also have the potential to significantly enhance this hotspot identification and how we approach this problem.
Thanks, Sam. That approach makes a lot of sense. Um, Erica, I'd like to turn things back to you for a moment. You just gave the example of Barnardos Australia and how they were able to consolidate a series of disparate systems onto one customer portal. I'm curious also to dig in maybe a little bit more into LifeRay's capabilities. And I guess from your perspective, as someone who's been a technical architect for so long, what are some of the architectural considerations or capabilities that make LifeRay Digital Experience Platform particularly well suited for these kinds of use cases for integrating and modernizing, these diverse legacy systems that many organizations have?
Yeah, I do think there are some key LifeRay strengths that directly address these types of integration headaches that you mentioned that our customers face when trying to connect these vastly different systems. I'll try to break it down into four different areas. So the first piece is that we have a really robust integration framework that supports a wide array of standards and protocols, and that includes REST APIs, GraphQL, even proprietary APIs. And this is crucial because, as our customers often attest, legacy landscapes are rarely uniform. The second piece is LifeRay's focus on headless capabilities. I think is a big advantage here. We consistently hear from companies that they're expected to rapidly deliver these new digital experiences without getting bogged down in that back-end complexity that we've talked about. And a headless approach allows companies to expose that content and services from back-end systems via LifeRay's APIs, which can then be consumed by any front-end application or device. And so this is particularly useful, I think, for modernizing front-end experiences while you're keeping that core business logic back there within the legacy systems. So it also helps to decouple that presentation layer from the data source. And I think this provides a lot of flexibility in that way. And as an example, we do have a customer who is a multinational construction company that's based in Spain, and they needed a B2B portal on LifeRay SaaS to give their customers direct access to essential project information while they were on their construction sites. And this included viewing documents like invoices, delivery notes, purchase orders, contracts, you name it. And a critical requirement was synchronizing that data nightly from Microsoft Dynamics ERP into LifeRay to keep the portal's information very accurate. And we had a LifeRay partner implement this customer portal in just 6 months. For that crucial nightly data sync, the team leveraged LifeRay's headless APIs. And this project, which went live in, I think, February of 2024, successfully demonstrates, I think, the power and the flexibility here of LifeRay's headless APIs when you're dealing with more complex enterprise integrations. And this custom integration logic effectively handled the large scale nightly Delta sync, and it ensured that the data consistency between Dynamics and the LifeRay portal was there without needing to process the entire 100,000 record data set each time. So it showcases, I think, how LifeRay's APIs, when you combine it with custom external logic via client extensions or some other integration pattern, can provide that critical help for B2B applications that require efficient data exchange. Then our third piece here is that we have a growing library of pre-built connectors developed by our partners and community members that's already available on the LifeRay Marketplace, which is our solutions marketplace. And it showcases applications and extensions developed on top of LifeRay DXP and created by our partners, community, and LifeRay itself. So this means that for many common enterprise systems, our customers don't have to start from scratch. These connectors can help accelerate the integration efforts and therefore contribute to that technical debt reduction by streamlining their connectivity. And lastly, I've found in talking with customers in the past that customization has kind of become a bad word as well when it comes to solving these types of business problems. And I think LifeRay is really focused on building more low code and no code capabilities that can empower not only developers, but even non-technical users to configure integrations without that extensive custom coding or customization, which further accelerates your development cycles. And in low-code LifeRay development, LifeRay's client extensions are our go-to approach for how you extend LifeRay to work with external applications and build and deploy your microservices independently of LifeRay's framework. And that can give your developers the freedom to use the right tools for the job, whether it's a different language, it's a lighter framework, or an entirely separate environment. LifeRay's client extensions are pretty ideal for interacting with that legacy data because they allow you to connect to external systems without tightly coupling your LifeRay instance to the legacy application.
Yeah, that's a great point, Erica, and it ties in a little bit to I think what Sam had mentioned earlier about many organizations have teams that want to use maybe some newer front end technology like Vue.js or React, and client extensions are a great way to do that and connect with LifeRay's core services without having to learn any Java or OSGI or any of those things. And that's terrific. Sam, I'd also kind of love to turn back to you and get a little bit deeper onto kind of some of Veriday's approach. So earlier you had mentioned trying to identify and kind of isolate those single points of failure, and of some of the fear on clients when it comes to code refactoring. I'd love to dig in that a little bit more and just kind of get your perspective, practically, what are maybe some of the key strategies that you employ when you're working with clients to help them modernize those legacy systems, help them move towards a more unified digital foundation? and then how do you ensure that those strategies align with the client's business goals?
Absolutely. And I'm actually going to tackle the second half of your question first, that alignment with business goals. And then I'm going to come back to the first part about some of those strategies. Because I really think it's important that everything we do aligns with the client's business goals. And one of the ways we do that is by working with every consultant, every team member we have, from maybe a junior QA to a senior architect, and making sure that it's clear to them that they are not working for a customer testing widgets or building integrations. They are working with a customer trying to help that customer achieve their business goals. Because no one just wants to go and buy a QA tester. They want to buy a QA tester because they're testing something that they think is going to help achieve those goals. And understanding those goals can help surface a lot of important things in conversations. Um, when we're talking modernization or any other aspect that really becomes key. So it's important that everyone understands those goals. I'll encourage, our employees, if they're invited to a customer's, quarterly all staff, attend the quarterly all staff, listen to what the C-level execs are saying, find out where that business is heading, because that insight ultimately trickles down into what you're building. And then it's important we get that alignment as a project team as well. So this is where things like our quarterly business reviews will come into play, defining metrics that are tied to operational outcomes, time to market, customer satisfaction, operational gains, getting all those metrics in place, having tight feedback loops in place so that we can really measure and understand our technical decisions and see if they're going to conflict with any of those business decisions, if those business timelines are in place. So, mentioned customers like Kearney. We have, at least monthly meetings with their execs. You mentioned other customers like Volkswagen. We'll go down and see them in person and really understand what those metrics are, what those goals are, and make sure that any modernization, any projects that we're working through with them align. Then what's our team doing to actually achieve those goals? This is where we're taking a bit of a top down and a bottom up approach. So from the top down, I think Erica, you mentioned, your experience as an enterprise architect in the past. This is where you're really building that foundation, setting those goalposts in place so that you've got strong patterns across the organization. So anything new being built is moving towards that modern architecture. One thing I love to have is a strong experience system in place for all those reasons that Erica mentioned, because if you have a strong experience system in place, you can hide a lot of the mess from the customers from your clients while you're modernizing systems in the back end. You mentioned customization being a dirty word, and that's where we'll look at strategies where we're not customizing the core of any platform. So a lot of our customers have big, complex ERP systems. They've invested heavily in customizing those ERP systems, which causes challenges in upgrading and maintaining those ERP systems down the road. If we can take an experience platform, an automation platform, and we can wrap a lot of that and move those customizations into areas where they're built to do that. Maybe using low code, maybe using custom pieces that are written in more high code environments externally, but separating the custom development from the core platforms really helps establish a strong foundation. API first development, another key strategy that we'll use at the top down. We had a customer where we were building an application for them, building APIs specifically for the front end, but keeping in mind, hey, these might need to be used again. They seem like there's some use cases these could be useful for in the future. And a couple months after go live, they came in with requirements that said, hey, we need to integrate this external provider with our application. They need to send data into it. Well, the APIs were in place, a little bit of work around authentication, a little bit of changes to support their use cases, make things more general. But rather than being a new piece of development, it was a small enhancements on top of existing work. And that all is around building for the future today, which is what I believe should be happening at the top with those architectural guidelines. Maybe we're not on cloud today, but we might be in the future. How do we build things that will work in cloud? In the LifeRay world, maybe we're running on-prem, but We don't like maintaining everything. If we ever did want to move to SaaS or PaaS, what do we have to do today so that that transition could be easier in the future? And then at the bottom up, I was talking before about establishing a baseline when we do our technical reviews. Well, this is where we want to maintain and build on that baseline. So a lot of progressive enhancement here. If developers are going in and touching code, make sure you leave the code better than it is. Maybe we have opportunities within specific project teams to modernize the UI. So we worked with a retail customer and we built that rich UI layer on top of their legacy backend systems. Excuse me, which bought more time for uh, extensive backend changes. So working at the right layer, applying things like um, abstraction layers so you can swap things out in the future. We've had customers where we've had one system for policies. Well, we want to replace it with a new policy system. In that presentation layer, maybe we're able to merge the two together, showing policies from legacy and new, then eventually decommissioning legacy. So putting all of these pieces in play so that we've got that flexibility down the road and that it does align with their business goals and make it easier for them to make the changes they're going to need to do down the road.
That makes a lot of sense, Sam. Um, Erica, turning back to you for a second, I feel like one of the common threads that I've heard throughout this conversation is integration, and I think that was key in both the Bernardus Australia use case as well as in the example of the multinational construction firm that based in Spain. And I'd love to build on that a little bit and just kind of get your perspective about, so how does Liferay actually support the transition from these fragmented systems to a unified digital foundation, especially in terms of maybe things like fostering agility, driving strategic business outcomes? Is there an example that you can give about how Liferay has helped clients achieve that?
Yeah, definitely. I think LifeRay is designed to be what I would call a central hub for a unified digital platform. So the core principle here is to create kind of a single pane of glass experience, not just for your end users, but for all types of users, your administrators and your content managers. And then by integrating these various systems and consolidating the information and the processes together, companies can break down those silos that often exist within what we call these fragmented landscapes. And I'd like to start with three specific ways I think we can help achieve that, and then tackle some examples. So the first one I wanted to touch on was accelerated time to market. So with a unified platform, with new digital initiatives such as self-service portals, employee intranets, partner portals, you can launch these much, much faster. Teams can leverage existing components and integrations within LifeRay instead of building from scratch or wrestling with these complex point-to-point connections that we talked about before. The second is that improved collaboration and efficiency. So by bringing the content, the data, the workflows, the entire workflow into a single environment, employees and partners can have that consistent, streamlined experience. And so this is going to reduce so much of that operational inefficiency. It's going to improve the data consistency and fostering the better collaboration across your departments. And then the third piece that I wanted to touch on is enhanced personalization and customer experience. So the unified foundation really allows for a holistic view of the customer experience. And LifeRay's personalization features can then leverage this consolidated data to deliver more highly tailored experiences, which can help drive your customer engagement and loyalty. And I can't name specific customers here due to confidentiality, but I just like to share a couple of common scenarios that we see. For instance, a large financial institution used LifeRay to consolidate numerous fragmented customer portals. Each of them served a different product line and incorporated them into a single personalized customer experience portal. And this not only improved customer satisfaction, but also reduced their operational costs significantly by centralizing their management and content. And another example is a manufacturing company that integrated their ERP, their CRM, and various internal systems into a single LifeRay-based employee portal, providing their global workplace with immediate access to critical information and tools, streamlining their internal operations, and it boosted productivity. These are direct examples of moving from fragmentation to that unified, agile digital foundation that we talked about that drives those measurable business outcomes.
So those are great examples, Erica. Thanks so much for sharing those. I'd love to kind of continue on this thread a little bit, and Sam, maybe turn things back to you, and just ask, kind of building on some of what Erica just shared. What are some of the best practices that you've observed from Verity's experience working with clients to integrate some of those existing and new applications and achieve a coherent experience or cohesive experience, I guess I should say, for both maybe the end user, but then also for the internal administrators, folks maybe in business roles within the organization itself?
Yeah, so when we're coming to integrate different applications, one thing that really ties them together is the UI. And that's where something like LifeRay comes in, is giving a consistent UI to the applications kind of hides a lot of the back end mess, to be honest, that goes into the integration behind the scenes. So we wanted to make it look pretty. But behind the scenes, it's really about establishing, integration patterns, an API layer that can support these different applications. And if the application has an existing API, that's great. That's the easiest approach. If there isn't an API for the application, then we might be looking at other options that are out there. We might be tying into the database directly. We might be exposing the data through some sort of RPA solution that's actually scraping the screens and doing things behind the scenes. We've Worst case, it could even be a swivel chair at a certain point. You put a beautiful UI up in front, but you've got someone in there who's actually keying things in behind the scenes, a little bit of the Wizard of Oz behind the scenes. And again, it's all about getting value to your customers quickly and then buying time to do those bigger, more complicated effort, bigger lift pieces, maybe building some APIs around that application, maybe upgrading into a version that has an API, maybe putting an RPA solution in place, or um, putting some data integrations in place to tie in that application. And all of these patterns can be used for that integration. Um, but if you've got that UI and you get that in place quickly, you've got value for those customers right away. And then from there, it's just different patterns where you're breaking those service layers between them. We'll often use a domain-based model, so we're blocking things by domain. Sometimes it's by application. Within LifeRay, we've got a lot of flexibility to configure basically micro applications or micro front ends when we're starting to tie things together. We might be using LifeRay objects and webhooks to tie things in there as well too. Really, the sky's the limit as to the how. As long as you've got that experience in place, you got that value for the customer, and then you can go away. You can get your smart technical people in there to build things that there's no one size fits all pattern. You got to find the right pattern for each application when you're tackling those integrations.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Erica, I'd like to just continue to build on that a little bit. So one of the things Sam just shared was, hey, if you're able to deliver, for lack of a better term, pretty good looking UI, it can help kind of obfuscate some of the ugliness, if I may, in the back end systems. I'm curious for organizations that are looking to build that kind of single pane of glass, that UI that Sam had mentioned. What are some of the key features in LifeRay that or approaches that you've taken with clients that would facilitate that seamless integration between the existing applications and then new functionalities, new experiences that organizations want to deliver for their either their customers or their employees, partners, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that building that true single pane of glass is actually a very common goal among our customers. And a key piece is LifeRay's content management and digital asset management capability. So LifeRay can enable companies to centralize all their content, if it's documents, images, videos, web content, regardless of its original source, via what we call asset libraries. And then this content can be easily surfaced and managed from a single interface and reused across various digital touchpoints, whether it's a website, a portal, or a mobile app. Another key piece, I think, is LifeRay's user and identity management capability. So we offer single sign-on capabilities that integrate with standards like LDAP, SAML, OAuth, and OpenID Connect. This means that users can log in once and then access various applications and services integrated into the LifeRay platform without needing to re-authenticate or navigate different interfaces. So this significantly improves the user experience and it reduces friction. A third piece is our widgets and fragments architecture, which combine with our headless APIs and it enables companies to display that information and the functionality from all their disparate systems within that single LifeRay page. For example, a financial institution might have a legacy system for account balances. They might have a newer CRM for customer service interactions, and then a third-party application for loan applications. And LifeRay can pull the specific data or UI components from each of these systems and present them together in a single unified dashboard for the customer or for an employee, making it appear as one cohesive application. And then finally, the last point I want to touch on is the flexibility that you can deploy LifeRay on-prem or self-hosted. You can deploy it in the cloud or as a managed service, combined with its support for modern development practices like CI/CD, means that organizations can continuously integrate and deploy new functionalities and updates without disrupting that existing single pane of glass experience. So I think this agility ensures that the platform remains current and responsive to evolving business needs over time. And a really great example of this is Claiborne, which is the largest paper producer and exporter in Brazil. And they were able to leverage the functionality of LifeRay DXP deployed onto LifeRay PaaS in the cloud to launch a new digital workplace that integrates with dozens of internal and external systems. So their digital workplace featured several progressive web apps. It's scalable for increased demand, and it doesn't even require a team to maintain it because LifeRay is doing all the work. With LifeRay, Claiborne was really able to build a solution that's more than just an intranet. And today it acts as the primary authentication provider for 14 external applications, including ServiceNow, Concur, and SuccessFactors. In addition, some applications were made available, like I said, via progressive web apps, which can grant the end user offline access and push notifications. So now they can offer services and content through an integrated digital ecosystem, and they can have that personalized experience for all users. So they're able to communicate, collaborate, and be productive anywhere, anytime.
That's great. And they were actually, I recall, they were one of our early cloud customers. And I remember how excited the team was when they went live. So that's a really great, really great use case. Thank you for sharing that, Erica. Sam, I'd love to turn things back to you for a second. One of the things that you kind of tagged me on earlier was pointing out, hey, it's not just about thinking about the kind of the modernization first. Really, you have to come to the engagement thinking about what are the client's business goals, what's going to drive business value for them. And I think that kind of gets to a little bit of the elephant in the room, at least for me, which is justifying ROI. And I'm curious, um, for you, Sam, again, we talked a little bit about the risk of falling behind when it comes to modernization, but what are some of the approaches that Veraday takes to help clients demonstrate that ROI and secure buy-in from stakeholders when it comes to modernization initiatives? Are there specific metrics that you focus on?
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. I think it's important to recognize a few things. So first, different stakeholders are going to think about ROI differently. So your CFO, your finance team might be looking at things, largely from a cost perspective. You know, if we modernize, is it going to cost us more or less in the long run? Your CTOs, your IT team, they're going to be looking at things more from a risk mitigation perspective. If we modernize, are we going to have fewer outages, less CVEs? What's our business continuity going to look like? And then business leaders, they actually, sometimes it's hardest to justify ROI to them when it comes to modernization because they're really looking for operational improvements. Um, and if it's just a lift and shift to a new platform, you've got to show where are they going to see those operational improvements, often which come through bigger changes. So we're looking at it through all these different lenses, and I'm going to start with that operational efficiency one. They're often looking at ways to eliminate manual processes or redirect users from, high intense areas like a call center into something like a self-service portal. And so we worked with an electronics retailer, working on an automated partner portal for them. And as part of that, we did a lot of work streamlining inventory management, streamlining vendor communications. And that really showed a lot of the operational gains, and being able to point to experiences like that when we're having that conversation can really help from that side. The CTO side, it's a lot easier from an ROI perspective to get their buy-in when it comes to modernization, because the metrics we're looking here are things like what's the cost per hour of a system downtime? What are the penalties we can avoid from regulatory compliance failures? What is the risk of a security vulnerability? What's the impact from a support perspective from platform end of life? So if we're modernizing platforms, we're addressing all of those things. We're making it easier to upgrade. We're making it easier to patch. We're bringing things up to standard. So we worked with a utility provider, and we went through a modernization exercise on a lot of their web platforms, and we got them to 99% uptime. We got them to AODA, accessibility, compliance, all things that they were falling behind on their legacy platforms. So modernization, often an easy sell from that perspective. And then from the CFO side, from that finance side, what are we looking at from that revenue perspective? What are we looking at from that growth perspective? And that's where, some of the things Erica was talking about, newer versions of LifeRay, newer capabilities really can reduce your time to market. You can build out new features quickly. So you're seeing cost improvements in the long run because you can deliver value to customers faster. Alignment with modern standards, modern look and feel. You might see increases on customer satisfaction. You might see more engagement, all of which might drive more revenue in the long term. And then at the end of the day, we want to roll all of this up into a TCO calculation. So that's where some of those maintenance costs come into play. Are we reducing our support hours? What is the impact on our vendor fees? Can we optimize our infrastructure, training, knowledge transfer efficiency, future scalability, cost avoidance? All of these things are factors that are going into our measurements that demonstrate that TCO. So we'll look to our history to get numbers that help justify the cost in the future. And I know we're coming up on time, so I'm going to pass it back to you, Yotam.
Thanks, Sam. No, those are all great points, and really important point and interesting point to note that oftentimes the stakeholder that it is more difficult to demonstrate ROI to is not the technical decision maker like the CTO, but it is the business decision maker or someone in the kind of the revenue or accounting department. Erica, just in a little bit that we have left, I'd love to kind of conclude with you and also get your perspective a little bit on some of those same points that Sam was just talking about. And just are there things again beyond those technical aspects, more for those business decision makers, where LifeRay helps organizations to justify their investment in modernization and to demonstrate tangible ROI in their business? If there's maybe a couple of quick examples that you could give, that might be helpful for the audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're almost out of time, but I'd like to touch briefly on 4 points. And Sam and Verde have been working on, as well as Sam described. So the reduced total cost of ownership. I think that with LifeRay, the modularity and reusability of those components also reduces custom development costs, maintenance overhead, licensing fees. We've seen instances where customers reported a reduction in operational costs by up to 30% just by consolidating their digital operations. And I think that leveraging LifeRay PaaS is a great example of reducing the overall TCO because it lets LifeRay handle the operational maintenance and overhead inherent in that digital cloud solution. And a great example of that was also Claben, as I mentioned before. The second piece was increased operational efficiencies. So you'll have that single pane of glass experience, which directly translates to improved employee productivity as well. So less time spent navigating multiple systems, searching for information, means more time that you can focus on your core business activities. And I think a great example of this is a large regional development bank that we worked with in Latin America. And they were able to optimize their operations by managing both their public portal and intranet onto a single platform. And this new architecture really increase their user session times by up to 16% now that clients can find the information that they need with fewer clicks. And with enhanced customer and partner engagement, so we have numerous case studies across industries available on our website that you can check out from healthcare to manufacturing, where we've seen organizations see measurable improvements in customer satisfaction scores and a significant increase in their online self-service interactions after implementing LifeRay DXP. And then lastly, accelerated innovation and time to market. So definitely the LifeRay's agile platform here helps quickly launch digital products, new services, new experiences, and allows that faster time to market. And I think that a great example of this is Unilever. It's a company that my dad retired from after over 40 years of working there. And they were able to achieve a 133% faster go to market and respond even faster to market shifts and customer sentiment using LifeRay.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Thank you, Erica, and thank you, Sam. I think we are just a little bit over time. So just I want to be respectful. I know folks have other meetings to get to. Erica, Sam, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your insights. To everyone in the audience, thank you for making the time. I know everyone's busy. We really appreciate you joining us today. As I'd mentioned earlier, we will share a copy of the recording. And if there are any further follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to address those. So with that, I'll just again thank everyone for their time and go ahead and close the webinar for today.